Thank you very much. Thank you. Yes. Happy to another Black History Month we've got this year today. 10th of October is also my birthday. I hope you're enjoying Mbira music. Thank you very much. And means wake up, let's go. It's a song for hunters. One of the songs they used to play when they do hunting ceremonies. So it's a song about that whatever we do, working in the office, whatever we do, it's hunting. So the song is taking from our sisters that come and lead us wherever we do our work. Like how we used to look after yourselves when you were hunting, look after our future. And now the song I'm playing now, it's called Tema Musasa. It means cut down the tree and build a home. Long time ago in Africa they used to live under the houses made of wood. So this song is saying Musasa tree, build a home of Musasa tree. And it's a song about black bad spirit at a home. So you're telling the person to rebuild a new home and live together and live the family where there's bad spirit. It's a song about a home. Una musasa, tema musasa, tema musasa, tema musasa iwe, tema musasa, tema musasa iwe, tema musasa, chitema musasa tisizimali, chitema musasa tigare tese, chitema musasa tisizimali, tema musasa, tema musasa vakomana, tema musasa, tema musasa, watema musasa vakomana, tema musasa, watema musasa tigare tese, tema musasa, tireka kutema mwana wa matani, tema musasa, watema musasa tisizimali, tema musasa, regaini taura mai mwana, regaini taura mai mwana, itaura mai mwana, regaini taura vakomana, regaini taura vakomana, itaure vasikana, regaini taure vakomana, regaini taure vakomana, regaini taure vasikana kani, chitima nitakura mai mwana, chitima nitakure vakomana, chitima nitakure vasikana kani, ndiana daita ndeoreka, ndiana mudaita, ndiana mudaita, vakomana ndiana mudaita, ndiana daita ndeoreka, ndiana mudaita, vakomana ndiana mudaita, vasikana ndiana mudaita, ndiana mudaita ndeoreka, ndiana mudaita iwe, ndiana mudaita, vakomana ndiana mudaita iwe, nditaura mai mwana iwe, regai nditaura vakomana iwe. It's my birthday today, please. Together with me. Timing.
The tree that you were singing about with the
Yes.
bad spirit, did that come from a particular part of religion from Zimbabwe, or is it?
Yes, Mnemam Sasa is a song that is covers whole country, especially Mashonaland, because there's two languages. We've got Ndebele people, they originate from South Africa, so they don't use Mbira as their culture. But nowadays they're using it because the culture is linked, they become one. So in Shona traditions, the song Mnemam Sasa, Musasa is a tree. There's a tree called Musasa tree. But long time ago, before they discovered the bricks of building, they were using Musasa tree to build a nice home. But if some bad spirit comes to the family, like if one of our brothers goes and kills someone, the person they kill is innocent. So the spirit of that innocent person will follow the family, and it will finish the whole family, killing one by one, until people repress their spirit. So we're saying that home is black, is dark. Leave that home. When we're saying leave, we're saying cleanse yourself. Go get cleansed. Go and see the healers. They cleanse you, and go and pay for the person you've killed, so that you get out of this situation. Because we believe that you can't let down another spirit. And sometimes it's black home because of a witchcraft attacking the place. So it can be black home because of so many dark reasons.
Some of the poems I'm going to read are about music, some are sort of not about music. I'm going to start by reading a poem that's kind of in homage to the lovely Jamaican food we've had. Because my dad had quite an unorthodox lifestyle. He was a professional gambler. That's how he earned his money. He played poker. And he was out most nights of my childhood playing cards. He slept off poker in the morning, and then in the afternoon he was really a house husband. He did all the cooking, and so me and my brother grew up mainly eating Jamaican and Chinese food. And I was asked to write this poem that kind of reflected on what it was like to grow up with three cultures: the English, the Black Jamaican, and the Chinese. For an event about national identity, and I was reflecting on how my house, the home I grew up in, embodied those three different cultures. So the poem is called Three Treasures. Three Treasures. Jamaica in the attic, in a dark blue trunk, seesaw in the hinges. What must it look like, all that wide blue sea? England downstairs in a rocking chair, Nana rocking with her playing cards, cigarettes and toffee, teppy tea. Jamaica frying chicken in the kitchen, pig snout in the stew pot, breakfast pan of saltfish and ackee. China in the wonton skin, gold songbird on the brittle porcelain, pink pagoda silk settee. Jamaica in the statues, lignum vitae heads of dreadlocks and Nancy, rebel spider in the storybooks and poetry. England eating peaches on the patio, hopscotching, mum in wellies, secateurs around the rosebush and the raspberries. England painting midnight with a sparkler, cousins throwing Guy Fawkes on the bonfire, orange ash confetti. England for the English, in graffiti on the roundabout and bus shelters, please sir on TV. Jamaica on the phone at 3 a.m, my father's back home voice through fuzz and crack, my friend, long time no see. China, in the Cantonese he knew but wouldn't speak, in letters stuffed in shoeboxes, ink stick calligraphy. China, in his slender bones, in coral birds of stitched bamboo. China, in an origami butterfly that flew. Well, it's kind of related to music. You can't dance unless there's music playing, or you can, but it might look a bit strange. The next poem I'm going to read reflects on my career as a dancer. I joined Betty Finch's ballet class when I was 5, and I think I stayed till I was 15. And I was awful at ballet. It was like torture, very self-conscious and huge compared to all of the other ballerinas. And this poem sort of reflects on that, and also the embarrassment I felt when my dad would come to pick me up, because, as you can imagine, I was often asked, is that man your father? Because he was black and I looked so white. And it wasn't just that about my dad, it was also the fact that he was 25 years older than my mum and had often just got out of bed when he came to pick me up. And so often his hair, white hair, dishevelled, and he'd be standing there and all the mums were around. And I was very embarrassed of him. The poem's called Dance Class. The best girls posed like poodles at a show, and Betty Finch in lemon gauze and wrinkles swept her wooden cane along the rows to lock our knees in place and turn our ankles. I was a scandal in that class, big-footed giant in lycra, joker in my tap shoes, slapping on the offbeat while 100 tappers hit the wood. I missed the cues each time. And after, in the foyer, Dad, a black man, stood among the Essex mothers clad in leopard skin. He'd shake his keys and scan the bloom of dancers where I hid, and whispered to another ballerina, he's the cab driver my mother sends for me. I'll stay on the theme of sort of dancing and music, and I guess one of the formative experiences for me growing up in Ilford in Essex, for all people, of young people during the 80s, was kind of the impact of black culture on our lives, really. I went to a very multicultural school, and while I was at sort of junior schools when breakdancing and hip-hop kind of hit Essex, and everyone went crazy for it. It wasn't just the black kids, it was the Asian kids as well, it was the white kids, and the white kids wanted to hang out with the black kids because they were good at breakdancing, and it was very much sort of like that. And my brother, who was a complete nerd up until the age of 15, all of a sudden got a load of cred when he got good at breakdancing. And this sort of irked me in a way, because I felt that I had the potential to be a good breakdancer if only I was given the opportunity. So this poem explores that. I should say a little bit about maybe just music in general as well. It's that for me, writing poetry is so closely linked and aligned to music, not only in things like rhyme, for example, and a lot of my poems rhyme, but also in the rhythm and the metre. And often I've striven to write poems in very sort of conventional forms, like sonnets and rhyming couplets, to explore unconventional subject matter. And so this poem, you may notice, is written in very strict iambic pentameter and rhyming couplets, and it's actually just about Essex and breakdancing. It's not about lofty, it's not love poetry or epic poetry. It's about heroes, different than my kind of childhood heroes, I suppose. B-Boy Summer. It was the summer of the caterpillar. Boys at the door in caps and shell-toe trainers, asking for my brother. Dan, rebranded, baggy jeans and neon laces. Cool kid they should knock for now. Beautiful boys in the flower garden, rocked to the noise of hip-hop, salt and pepper, De La Soul. I watched them, kneeling on the windowsill, Elijah spinning on a square of lino, Richie waiting for the cue to throw his body down an applejack or windmill, Charlie springing from his back to land straight up, heroic on 2 feet. And later, at the bedroom door, the beat of bassline and their laughter as I waited on the landing, little sister loaded with desire to be a boy, 15 and in the crew. On the gymnastics team at school, I was the best at backward somersaults, could fling myself one-handed on the vault. But I was never a B-girl, just a body growing, loving boys who never saw me in the silent garden where I'd go alone to headspin on the moonlit liner. I should say there that I might have slightly exaggerated my gymnastics skills for the purposes of the poem. I'll read one more poem from Chick, and then I want to read a couple of newer poems. And this poem is about reggae music, which I very much fell in love with when I came to university in Brighton, Sussex, 1994, I think I was here. And when I came to university, I fell in with a group of students that all really loved dub reggae in particular. And these are like white kids with dreadlocks, if you know the sort. And when they found out my dad was Jamaican, I got I was cool because of that. And I think they imagined that my dad was like an old Rastafarian sat at home in Ilford. But in actual fact, my dad had grown up in colonial Jamaica and very much, actually, we probably disapproved of Rastafarianism at the time in sort of 1940s before he left. And wasn't into reggae music at all. My dad loved jazz and blues and ragtime and that kind of stuff. But I didn't ever disabuse these kids of that. And they never met my dad to know any different. It's called Reggae Story. My father liked the blues and Lady Day. He left Jamaica way before the reggae rocked all night in Backstreet Studios, before King Tubby or Augustus Pablo. But I used to love a boy who loved dub reggae, loved thick lugs of ganja, loved on Sunday nights to cross the river and take me to the House of Roots and Abashanti in the cobbled arches under Vauxhall, where the Lion of Judah decked the walls and stacks of speakers pumped electric bass, a single bulb above the smoky haze, and on the stage a little dreadlocked man like Rumpelstiltskin shouted Jah and spun his blistering tunes on a single turntable, and shut-eyed men called back over the vinyl, Jah Rastafari. Next door, the old guys were like wizened goats with yellow eyes hunched over games of chess and ginger tea, below the golden-framed Haile Selassie, King of Kings. That boy didn't know my father was a white-haired, godless pensioner, and reggae music never really got me until I played it on my own. Bob Marley, Uroy, Johnny Clark, and even then it came like hymns or Fauré's Requiem, Vivaldi's Gloria. That boy thought I had a Rasta like Prince Farai for a dad, not the silent island man who sat beyond the bedroom door I'd listen at to catch a woman crooning down a melody. I can't give you anything but love, baby. Yeah. My nan was a right old racist, basically. She came from the slums of Kennington, and she nearly dropped down dead when my mum brought a black guy home in the 1960s in Ilford and said, "This is my boyfriend," and he's also much, much older. So it explores some of these ideas around race and music. Cherokee. Phone me up, a party, would I go? My mum said, "Joe, who's Joe, a darkie? No, not on your Nelly, lady, no you won't you." Lipstick, lacquered beehive, tweed mist perfume, took the bus, and of course there was no party, just a room and whiskey on the bedside, fag ash on the tangled sheets at dawn. Oh, he could play an ace, could Joey, could, the Aki blues and Cherokee. Da 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 da. He put his sacks in hock to pay the rent, said, "Betty, can you help me?" Had £1 off me on Sunday nights. He had it bad, he said. He'd not been with another girl in weeks, and no, my mother didn't sleep a wink. She sobbed into her mixing bowl. Off we went to Auntie Connie's caravan. He wore his suit and wingtip on the dunes. He said he loved me in the spinning teacups, vanished in the night. Oh, we knew a tune that bastard arsehole drunk, you'll never know, and Cherokee. Da 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 da. And no, I couldn't bring him home for Christmas over my dead body, lady, no. He came with razor smiles and lilac bath cubes. Oh, she sobbed into her mixing bowl. My father walked into the tube, came home and stank of whiskey, said, he's just like any other fella, ain't he, Betty, ain't he?
We might know that there are many books on Bob Marley, but before there was Bob Marley, there were three brothers, Bob Marley, Peter Tosh, and Bunny Wailer. And they were together for 10 years, from teenagers to about 27. And it was my ambition to reunite them. There was a show presided over by a man in the white jacket, that's Vere Johns, and he presided over a show in Jamaica called Opportunity Knocks. And on the radio it became Opportunity Hour. You may have heard of a man called Huey Green. Well, Huey Green stole the idea from this man here. This is the original, Opportunity Hour. And in Opportunity Hour in Jamaica, in Kingston, the capital, there were many different kind of acts who could apply to perform. So there were tumblers, there were magicians, there are rumba dancers, and there were crooners. And in 1963, the three boys I mentioned, Bunny, Bob and Peter, they performed at this event. And when they performed, the crowd went wild, rather like you now. They were so ecstatic and so thrilled by what they were hearing that they showered the stage with coins, and please feel free to recognize. They showered the stage with coins, and Peter Tosh says that they were having to dive from all the pennies and sixpences that were coming their way, and they filled all their pockets with these coins, and they were delighted, these teenagers. But at the end of the performance, all of the members in the audience realised that they were just as poor as the boys on stage, and they came and begged back the money. Every single penny was begged back. And I love that story because it shows, I think, the degree to which the Wailers, Bunny Wailer, Bob Marley and Peter Tosh, were of the people. They were of Trenchtown, and they were playing music for the people, for the local poor people, and near the poor people in Kingston. And the next image, please. So all the guys grew up in Trenchtown. This is a ward in Trenchtown, which has become quite a notorious place. It's a hard place to live. It's a ghetto now. But my mum, who's in the corner here, will tell you that it wasn't always a ghetto. So in the 1940s, when Trenchtown was built, it was built by the equivalent to the Lever Brothers. Do you know the Lever Brothers here? They had a socialist bent. They were altruistic, philanthropic people who built a fine set of housing project, but with fine materials, but they ran out of money. So much so that they couldn't afford a proper sewage system. So Trenchtown led to what became known as the scandal bag situation. Scandal bag, anybody? Yeah. Okay. It's not a dish that you want to take away with you, I can assure you. So in the early hours, when you needed to go for a poo, you poo into this little plastic scandal bag, and then come the time when the sun rises, you peer through your window, your door, make sure no one's looking, and then you creep to the edge of Trenchtown and you throw your scandal bag onto the mountain of other scandal bags that are growing. So that's the kind of poverty they came from. All the boys came from the country. In Jamaica, most people come from country, or bush, as we say. And it's the sort of place where they would have to cut up car tires to use as shoes. They call them power shoes. They would take banana leaves and make umbrellas out of them. And they would fashion cricket balls out of mango stones. And when the boys came to Trenchtown, they were teenagers. They didn't know each other, but when they came to Trenchtown, in my mind, they were rather like force-ripe youth. Anybody know that expression, force-ripe? So you know you have fruit, and you pluck it from a tree before it's ready, and you put it on your windowsill to ripen it, to hasten the speed of the ripening. That's force-ripe. And the same can be true of youth, young people who come from the country to the town, to the harsh environment, and they have to grow up pretty damn quick. And so the boys were older than their chronological years. They were forthright. And I think you can hear that in their songs. There was a kind of maturity to their songs, which was evident. That's not for Hannah to... Hannah and I first appeared together in Port of Spain, in Trinidad, about 6 months ago. And I've been following her career ever since, because I think it's great that she's doing what I'm trying to do with prose, she's doing with poetry. And we're kind of memorialising the past in a way, and bringing these rather colourful characters to the kind of tapestry of British culture. Hannah's father sounds a lot like my father, bad guy. He was a gambler as well. And my father worked at Vauxhall Motors in Luton, and every Friday he would and his mates get the wage packets from Vauxhall Motors and then head straight for Mrs. Knight's all-weekend poker game. And my father was always there first, and they would fry their chicken and get their rum and coke ready and party and dance with the Bluefoot, Nasty Nigger, gal there, and some of the Irish girls they were dancing with. Maybe your mother was there. She's not a nasty girl, but they were girls who enjoyed the company of these rather colourful Caribbean men. And they were colourful. And when I think, and if you imagine back to some of those photographs from Windrush, I'm sure you've all seen them, and the men are wearing these lovely fedora hats. And you realise actually there was no tradition in Jamaica wearing fedora hats. When they came to this country, they started wearing those hats because they wanted to present themselves in the way that they wanted to be perceived. And a lot of the blokes and the women had this style about them, as did the waiters, as you'll see shortly. But when I think about them, they all have these wonderful names. Chick is Hannah's father's nickname. We weren't sure about the derivation of Chick. It might have been chic.
It might come from chic.
It might have come from chic.
So well
Yeah. Well, they were all snazzy dresses, and some of the men around my father equally were chic. And they had these funny nicknames. So Pumpkinhead had a pumpkin-shaped head. Tidybus was very fussy about his footwear. Shine obviously is bald. Clock had one arm longer than the other. And my all-time favourite was the guy they called Summerwear, who, when he came to this country, he insisted on wearing light summer suits no matter the weather. And in the course of writing my book, Bad Guy at the Will, I asked my mother, who's the white hat over there, my mother whom I steal all my stories from, I asked her whatever became of Summerwear when he came to England in 1963, and she said, oh, he caught a cold and died. So it's a bittersweet tale, but actually a lot of Jamaican history is bittersweet, and central to Jamaican history is this man here. Who knows who this is? Marcus Garvey, Marcus Messiah Garvey, who was the subject of my first book. And I was intrigued when I was writing about Bob Marley, Peter Tosh and Bunny Ware to come across a phrase. I'm going to repeat it now. I wonder whether anybody knows this phrase. I'm not going to sing it, but it should be sung. We must emancipate ourselves from mental slavery, because whilst others might free the body, none but ourselves can free the mind. Who knows where that comes from? Anybody? Redemption song, right? Wrong. Yes, in a way, redemption song, but that phrase is actually from Marcus Garvey, from a speech he gave in 1937 in Menelek Hall, Nova Scotia. Now, Brother Bob read Marcus Garvey, as did Peter Tosh, Bunny Wailer, Burning Spear, all those guys. So often, when you're on the dance floor renting a tile, dancing along to the Wailers, you're actually dancing to Marcus Garvey. So he was a great guy, Marcus Garvey, and but he's for another tale. I won't tell you too much about it. What's intriguing about Bob Marley is his complexion, and Hannah hinted at this, the difficulties you might find if you are of mixed heritage. So Bob Marley's father was, in Jamaican parlance, he was almost white, socially white. He's not quite fully white.
To me.
There it is. There it is. There's Norval Marley, who appears to be white, but actually in Jamaican parlance we'd say he was touched by the tar brush, which means that somewhere down the line there'd been some black input to the gene pool. But ostensibly, as far as society was concerned, he was white. So if you can go back to the previous image. So there's Bob Marley, growing up in Trenchtown. Now, Trenchtown is a hard place. Trenchtown is a ghetto full of black people. Jamaica, as you know, as you all know, and you might learn more if you come to hear me speak at the University of Sussex at the end of the month, Jamaica, as you know, is a pigmentocracy. And by that it means that the black people are at the bottom, and there's a pyramid with white people at the top, and the brown people close to the white people. And the brown people and the white people ruled the roost, and they didn't live anywhere near a ghetto. They lived in the uptown parts of any city. So it's very usual to find a brown-skinned boy in a ghetto like Trenchtown. So Bob Marley grew up in a ghetto, Trenchtown. And it is said, if we go on for a couple now, it is said, there is in the middle, it is said by his then girlfriend, Rita, she said that he was so concerned about his complexion that he would get her to rub black shoe polish into his hair so that it appeared blacker and coarser, because he wanted to fit in. He wanted to be perceived to be black. Because at the time in the 60s in Jamaica generally, but Trenchtown in particular, Rastafari was ascending, was rising. And then Bunny Wailer, typically a man who, when it came to going on tour, said he'd rather plant his crops than feed his chickens. So a man in retreat. And there you have a kind of trilogy. You have Bob, the accommodator, Peter, the militant man, and Bunny, the man in retreat. And I think you see that model played out again and again in Jamaica. And then Peter was the only one who knew how to play guitar, and they mostly fashioned guitars out of old olive oil cans and telephone wires stripped down, and it's Rita on the end there. But the story of Jamaica changed fundamentally in the early 60s. So you know Jamaica was wedded to England for 400 years, hence the song 400 years. And for many years the Afro-Saxons and the Anglophiles were ascendant. But come independence now, there was a crisis of identity. So long you've been thinking of yourself as English or wedded to the motherland, so much so that actually it was often said in the late 50s that it was the ambition of every black man to be white, because your life would be better. But things changed in 1962, independence comes now, and there's a crisis of identity. And the Rastafari now look to Marcus Garvey, and they gel around him, and there becomes the sense that we must no longer look to Albion, to England, we must look back to our African ancestry. So the Rastafarians revere Haile Selassie, is the figure just here, little guy here. Haile Selassie, the Lion of Judah, King of Kings. Now Haile Selassie is thought of as God or Christ as far as the Rastafarians are concerned, and they adore him. And in 1962 or 63, Haile Selassie decides to have a state visit to Jamaica, and he gets on a plane and he flies from Ethiopia, and he's going to land at the main airport in Kingston. And on that airport, on all the tarmac, on every inch of tarmac, are Rastafarians. There are thousands of them, and they're beating their drums, and they're smoking their chiller pipes, and they're ululating, and they're chanting. And Haile Selassie looks out the window and is petrified, and he won't get off the plane. And for an hour, the plane sits there, and the authorities who have invited him are embarrassed, until one man from the authorities had the great idea to call for Mortimer Plano. Now, Mortimer Plano is the man in the front with the white outfit and the Rolex camera around his neck. Mortimer Plano is a Rastafarian elder. He's 36 in that photograph. But he's an elder, he's a street elder, he's from Trenchtown, and he's revered. And he climbs the steps, 15 minutes to go.
Attention, please. This is a customer announcement. Jubilee Library will be closing in 20 minutes.
Okay, I'll just 5 more minutes. So he mounts the steps, and he turns to the crowd, and rather like Moses parting the Red Sea, he commands the crowd to move, and the crowd parts. And Selassie descends the steps and goes on the state visit, and does an amazing thing though. The first thing he does, he goes to King's house, which is, you can't get any higher than King's house in Jamaica, and he invites the Rastafarians to King's house. Now Rastafarians, they may be revered now, they may be adored in our culture, but back in the day, Rastafarians in Jamaica, they were the dirty, barefoot, nasty Negadem. No one would have anything to do with them. They were shunned, they were black heart men that lived in the gullies. They were feckless, work shy, producing an army of children, and feared. And yet here comes Selassie and invites them to the king's house, and that's when the culture changes. And you can see the rise of Jamaican music with the rise of Rastafari. This is why you should encourage your children not to smoke marijuana. So all of the guys here have had one spliff too many. And when I was writing the book, I interviewed a man called Benjamin Foote. Benjamin Foote was the tour manager of the Wailers when they first came to this country in the early 70s. And he was the son, actually, of Sir Hugh Foote, who was the governor of Jamaica. And these Rastafarians were intrigued by the notion that they were being looked after by the governor's son. And he's told me that the main job he had when he came to London with them was to source ganja. And this is the result of it. Because they weren't just smoking little piddly things that broke apart like you'd have when you're a student back in this country. They were smoking big turnips of ganja. But they thought that was the medium to jar. And in some respects, you can imagine that actually, rather like the Beatles, who dabbled with ganja, that actually their music might have been enhanced. It certainly they had flights of thoughts as a consequence of it. But what intrigued me when I interviewed Benjamin Foote was to talk about what they were like as young men in this country. And they came and they weren't known in the early 70s. And he said they would hire this beaten up Bedford van and they would drive up and down the motorway to small gigs, Brighton, Luton, Liverpool. And he said that they were arguing, these three men, young men, were arguing non-stop, but they weren't arguing about the usual things. They weren't arguing about the running order of songs. They weren't arguing about girls, girls, girls. They weren't arguing about who's going to get the biggest room. They were arguing over scripture. And Benjamin Foote said that being in the band with them was like being in a seminary. They were down the road Rastafarians. They were mountain Rastas. We better skip on towards the end now because we're going to wrap up. There's Chris Blackwell. Another time we'll get to him, and another time. And one of the things that we most remember about, I most remember about Bob Marley was how brave he was. In 1976, someone tried to kill him and he fled and he came to this country. And then 2 years later, Jamaica was in the throes of civil war. And people yearned for him to come back and help to create peace. And he leads this peace concert in Jamaica in 1978. And he encourages the two warring factions to come together. These are the two heads of the different political parties, Edward Seaga and Michael Manley. And he does a strange thing. He gets them to hold hands, as you see in this photograph, above his head. And when Jamaicans see that image now, they say, yes, Bob in the middle, that's Jesus Christ on the cross beside the two thieves. And in a way, he's revered because he was able to do that. He was able to unify people and to unite people. I'm going to wrap it up there because we need to be united and to leave. But I'm going to say thank you very much for coming, and thank you very much to this woman who's approaching now, Amy, who's responsible for every year bringing this lovely group of people together to celebrate, I think, people who should be part of the canon. So that Black History Month is not actually just a month, it should be wedded into the history of this country. So let's have Black History Year next year.
We are really tight for time, but as always, I'd like to have a few questions from the audience. So we've got a hand and back.
Yeah. You didn't talk much about Marcus Garvey. I'm from Nigeria. I know nothing about Marcus Garvey until I came to the UK. Right. And then one thing I like about Marcus Garvey was that because he left from Jamaica to America to be able to unite the blacks. And we seems to not be doing what he did then because he was building and non-black individuals or communities are doing the same thing. I don't know if you can say what I suppose.
Yeah, well, Marcus Garvey was an amazing man. He was a Jamaican who made his name actually in Harlem in New York in the 1920s. And he was celebrated because of his sincerity and his colour. At the time when black people were at the footstool of society, he said to them, yes, you can. But actually what I love about Marcus Garvey was that he knew that you had to find allies. So Marcus Garvey in 1921 was proclaimed the provisional president of Africa, not a grand title to give himself, but he modelled himself on Eamon de Valera, who proclaimed himself to be the Irish president. And if you look at the way that Garvey rose, he's most famous for starting this shipping line called the Black Star Line, which is going to trade between Africa, the Caribbean, and America. But he modelled that on the Green Star Line that the Irish had started. And I think what's happened is that people don't recognise who the enemy is. And Garvey suffered as a consequence, I think, because ultimately there are many people who want to be the big I am, they say, in Yorkshire culture. And he didn't recognise that the people that he should have been forging relationships with were the people that he was told were the enemy. So at the time in America and in other parts of the Caribbean and in Africa, there's still this kind of pigmentocracy. And his greatest enemy, he thought, was this man called W.E.B. Du Bois, who led a movement of the National Association for the Advancement of Coloured People. And Garvey led a movement called the UNIA, the Universal Negro Improvement Association. But when things were bad, they would slander each other. So much so that Garvey's organisation was called the movement of the ugliest Negroes in America. So that's what happened. There was this kind of, in Freud would say it was the narcissism of minor differences. So that's the problem. We must put aside our differences and recognise that the problem is bigger than individuals. And even though there are many black Asian politicians now, I think there's still a narcissism which separates people. So we need to put away the mirror, probably.
We've got one more question in the back.
Yeah, what did you make of the film, Bob Marley film?
Irie! Have you seen the film, Bob Marley? So it's a wonderful film. I think it's a great film. Kevin MacDonald did this film called Marley. And the best thing in the film, do check it out, I'm going to spoil it for you, but in my mind, the best moment in the film, this documentary film, is when Kevin MacDonald, the director, Bob Marley's dead now, Kevin MacDonald goes to the home of the white side of Marley's family in Jamaica. And when Bob Marley's birth father died, by then he'd been abandoned by his father. So Bob Marley, as a feckless, roots, forthright youth, goes to find his white family in Jamaica. And they run him, they shun him. And Bob Marley left, and he wrote a song thereafter called The Cornerstone. And if you read your Bible, the cornerstone is the stone that the builder first rejects, but it becomes the stone which is the foundation of the house. So MacDonald, the director, goes to this white family in Jamaica, and he gives them an iPod and some headphones, and he plays them that song. And they're hearing it for the first time, and they realise that actually things have been reversed, that nobody knows who they are. The cornerstone is now Bob Marley, and it's thank you and goodbye, I think.
Give it up to Colin Grant and Hannah Lowe.